everybody, this is Hua. Welcome back to my YouTube storytelling channel. Today I am here with chapter 6 of The Bodyguard and the Courtesan. I hope that you have been enjoying the story. I welcome you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the next part of the story. Samara heard the horse hooves on the gravel outside and hurried to find Waylon and the man who had accompanied Maisie home the other night, arriving with heated expressions. As soon as Waylon got off the horse, he came to her, his eyes holding a dark stare that made her hands curled into fists. "Where is she?" he asked. Samara laughed, and she watched as the other man joined Waylon on the stairs. "What are you talking about? The only person in this world who has threatened to hurt her is you. Either you tell me where she is, or I will call off the wedding." "Are you mad? How can you accuse me of such a thing? I do not know what you speak of." "Maisie," the man behind Waylon cried. "Where is Maisie?" Laughing, she replied, "How should I know where she is? Did she not leave with you last night?" "Yes, indeed she did. But I woke up with her gone, and as far as I know, you were the one who threatened her safety, quite loud and clear, I might add, and even put your hands on her." Waylon turned around to face him. "What?" "Your bride-to-be has claws that are quite jealous, Lord Waylon. My dear Maisie's cheeks suffered at her hands last night." He turned around to her. "Where is she?" "I do not know what you speak of." Waylon nodded his head. "Fine. You will not speak? Then I shall take this matter to the king." He turned to go when she stopped him. "You are crazy mad for that whore. Why can you not love me?" Waylon turned to her. "You will never be loved by anyone except that father of yours." She watched as the two men turned and got on their horses to ride off. Anger fumed within her, and she let out a blood-curdling scream. Turning, she ran down the steps and through the wooden forested area to the shed behind the home. Taking the key from her waist, she opened the door, and a dirty Maisie looked up at her. "You have ruined my life," she cried. "You are nothing but a lowly woman with no future. How dare you take from me the one man I ever wanted?" Maisie smiled, and then she laughed. "You have yet to learn plenty about life, Samara. People like you never win, and even if you do, you are never going to be loved long." Screaming, Samara pulled the rake from beside the shed and began walking toward her, a lopsided grin on her face. "You should not have chosen me to fight with. I do not give in until the last breath is drawn, and I always win." She raised the rake, and Maisie got up to run, but it came down on her back, her flesh broken as the thorns entered her. The pain shot through her as Samara pulled it out and raised it ready to strike again, when a sword pulling from a sheath echoed across the earth. Samara dropped the rake from her hands as she fell to her knees, and Waylon stood behind her, sword in hand. Kaiden rushed to Maisie and helped her to stand up slowly. Waylon kicked the rake out of reach as Samara gasped from the pain on her back. "My lord," Samara whispered. "You are a murderer," Waylon said as his eyes filled with tears. "How could you do such an act? A woman who is as beautiful as you owns a heart as black as night." Laughing, Samara replied, "Black is the only color I can know of that will make me content. If I were not to be this way, my lord, I would lose you." "You already lost me." She coughed and turned her head toward Maisie. The gods favor you, whore. She stood suddenly, reached for Waylon's sword, and ran toward Maisie. The blade's light caused Maisie to scream, and Kaiden shoved her down, taking the lethal weapon into his heart. The scream from Maisie echoed across the land as Samara tumbled backward, shock written on her face as she fell to the ground. Waylon grabbed her arm and pulled her out, pulling his belt from his pants. He used it to tie her hands together, and she fell backward, her face in shock of what she had done. Maisie removed the sword from Kaiden's chest and used both hands to cover the wound, but blood escaped like a dam. Kaiden, Maisie sobbed. You... Why? He smiled and reached up a hand to touch her cheek. I love you. I would die for you, Maisie. Sobbing, Maisie replied, I am not worthy enough. You are. You always have. I know I am not the one you love. Every word you whispered to him that night at the garden, I heard it. This made her sob even more. But I forgive you, because I love you enough. No one can replace you ever. In dying in your arms, seeing your face as the last image before dark takes over me, is the greatest gift. I love you, Maisie. I love you. She bent down and captured his lips. I love you, Kaiden. He smiled at her, and the hand touching her cheek dropped. Waylon entered the prison, keeping Samara locked in, and found her sitting in the corner wearing a brown servant dress with her hands and feet in chains. It had been a week since Kaiden's death, and the funeral and burial had been taken care of. Maisie had gone into hiding from the world, and he hadn't been able to see her since. But Samara was watching him as if she had done nothing wrong. She stood up, adjusted herself, and gave him a smile that made his heart sink. This was a woman he almost married and shared a bed with. My lord, she whispered softly, you finally came to see me. Are you here to apologize and let me out? Waylon laughed and he shook his head. You have no remorse, do you? Why should I? He was no one. He was someone's son. 2 people will be mourning his absence for the rest of their lives. How can you be so heartless? Smiling, she replied, I am not heartless, my lord. I simply got rid of someone who was in my way, yet he jumped in to save her. It was wrong timing on his end, and he gladly gave his life for her. Why is that my fault? You are sick. Get me out of here, she cried. You will rot in here, he yelled. You belong here with the rats and mold. You will never see light for as long as you shall live. The king has decided your fate, and on the morrow you will be beheaded in public as an example. Her eyes filled with tears, and she came to him, grabbing him, her shoulders shaking. No, my lord, you must save me. You must save me. He ripped her hands from him and shoved her off. You have no sympathy for anyone. You think of no one but yourself. Your actions are yours to carry. I can no longer help you. May God forgive you. He turned and walked out as she screamed his name, and he heard her fall to her knees, but he slammed the gates closed and walked out as she continued screaming.
When the time is right and I'm not alone, I will conquer this and bring you home. When this world has stopped and the breeze is up, when the time is right, I'll sing.
Maisie heard the doors open, and when she turned around, Waylon was standing there staring at her with his dark eyes. She stood where she was, inside Kaiden's home, and didn't move as he watched her. It had been several days since his funeral, and she couldn't find the courage to move out. Everything in the home had been as it was when he last touched everything. But seeing Waylon today made her heart break as she thought of Kaiden's last words to her. He had heard everything she'd said to Waylon, and that night when he tried to make love to her, she had refused him, and he knew why. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "May I come in?" he asked. "No," she said. "This is Kaiden's home, and if you come, you will ruin his memory forever." "You are upset. I understand, Maisie, but do not hate me to justify your pain." She burst out in a sob. "It was your bride-to-be who murdered him. How can I not be angry? Kaiden did nothing wrong, and now he is gone from this world. He had the most perfect smile toward me, even when he knew I did not love him. He knew everything about how I felt, yet he pushed it all away just to have me in his presence. And she," Maisie said with gritted teeth, "she took it away from me. To satisfy her own greed and her own heart, she took it away from me." Waylon shook his head. "No, you do not understand, Maisie. She meant to take your life. She meant to take you away from me. But he loved you too much to let that happen. I am sorry he is not here with us, but do not punish yourself. You are not at fault. Kaiden's parents have cursed me to hell and back. I am responsible for the death of their son. In their eyes, I have murdered their only son." She sobbed. "I suppose I should have stayed with Delaney." Waylon walked in and shook her shoulders, shaking her lightly. "No, you are already a free woman. I will take you. I am no longer going to marry Samara. I can take you. Let me care for you." Maisie pulled herself out of his hold. "I cannot make my heart love you again, Waylon. It was because I loved you that I lost everything. You and I cannot be together. If we are to be as one, the world will go to war. You and I must stay away from one another. Our love hurts other people, and I have learned that perhaps I am not meant to be happy." He reached for her, but she backed away from his touch. "Get out," she whispered. "Leave me alone. There is nothing left for you and me." "No," he cried. "I will not listen to your guilty talk. You are not the best of mine right now. Nothing will make sense to you, and I shall fight to win your hand." Maisie laughed and slammed her fists against his chest. "And what will you do if the whole world fights against you? What will you do then? You are a royal guard of the king. You cannot parade with me beside you." "I will give up my name as the royal guard if it comes to it. I would rather have you, Maisie. Nothing in this world makes sense without you. I want you, and if I have to give up my life in order to have you, I will. I do not care anymore. I am done watching others take control of my life." She sobbed and fell into his arms. "My lord, why must the world always punish us? Just when I thought I would have a good life, it is stripped away from me in a blink of an eye. I must start over in a place that will not welcome me." "What do you mean?" he asked. She pulled away from him. "The king has summoned me to his palace halls as his concubine." She watched as he stumbled backward with a pained look on his face. She lowered her gaze and sniffed, her heart already tearing apart. "There is no way to say this without hurting you, my lord. If the king summons me, I must obey. If I refuse, you know the results, and I'm afraid I cannot pay that fee." She wiped her tears and looked at him. "I have loved no one but you my whole life. Every part of me that has life has been kissed by you. I do not know what I would do if I am to be by his side every day while watching you. I'm not strong enough." He fell to his knees, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "I'm cursed. I am." He looked up at her. "The biggest punish I will ever have is to endure watching you walk the halls of the palace walls and not be able to touch you when I know how it feels. When he takes your hand, I will know how soft they are and yet I'm not allowed to be near you. When he kisses you, I will remember how you tasted against my lips, and yet I cannot touch you. My love, tell me, how will we survive this? She fell to her knees and gathered him in her arms. My lord, I love you. My entire heart is yours, and always will be, no matter who I am with. I have never loved another, but I must watch another love you.
In the club, in the streets, waking up. Yeah, always when we meet, something's still missing. We're still faking it. We pretend that we're good, yeah. Cause to me, when I love, when I feel, I don't want nobody to tell me to slow down.
The wedding carriage arrived outside the palace, and the guards steadied their sword as they stood in line. Waylon felt his heart tug as he waited in the front, as King Cassius walked from the top of the stairs down in a long, royal gold wedding suit. He was happy, his cheeks a gentle rosy color that trembled upon Waylon's heart. The carriage curtain was removed, and out stepped Maisie in a beautiful yellow wedding gown, a veil over her with white flowers that hung around her wrists. She looked a vision as one of the servants lifted the train and began walking in rhythm with her. He held his breath as she got closer to him, and when she finally passed him, he noticed her eyes shift slightly to eye him. He felt his heart constrict and the breath leave his body. The king came down the steps and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to him, lifting her veil over her head. She had such gentle eyes that were lifeless, as the king leaned over and kissed her gently. Waylon's hands curled into fists as he watched the display of affection. Then the king took her hand and guided her up the stairs, where they disappeared into the palace walls. Waylon let out the breath he was holding, and felt as if his world had crashed beneath him. He turned and began walking to his quarters when one of his men-at-arms came to him. My lord, Lady Samara is asking for you. When he arrived, Samara was standing by the iron bars, a smile on her face, as he forced the hatred inside him down. He wanted to reach in and rid that smile off her face. My lord, she said with a grin, I heard the news that the whore has come to be the king's concubine. How that must have tortured your heart. Watch your tongue, Waylon muttered. She smiled. My heart truly feels for you, my lord. It does. He reached inside and grabbed her by the throat, pulling her toward him. Tomorrow, I will watch you take your last breath and smile. And I will die smiling knowing you will never have her. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Chapter 7 will be uploaded shortly.
In the club, in the streets, waking up. Yeah, always when we meet, something's still missing. We're still faking it. We pretend that we're good, yeah. Cause to me